Welcome to this week's edition of World Crisis Radio. This is Webster Tarpley speaking to you from Washington, D.C. The forces of fascism are in retreat, but in the moment of success, tighten your helmet strap. And this means the following. Trump has been battered. The fascist cause is on the ropes momentarily. There's nothing permanent about at least some of this damage. Some of it may be permanent, but we don't even know that at the present time. What we have to do, though, is to look at, first of all, the polls, which began coming in on Tuesday, showing a large convention bounce for the Democratic Party and a corresponding crisis in the Trump candidacy. And we can go through some of these polls, right? We will in just a minute. Well, maybe just the Real Clear Politics average of polls during the week now shows Clinton 47.3, Trump 40.5. It's also remarkable that in the favorability, positive, negative, Clinton, although still underwater, of course, is minus 10.2, but Trump is minus 26.0, and that leaves Clinton with an advantage of almost 16%. The betting odds, 77% chance for Clinton to win, 23% chance for Trump to win. And then as we go through the latest polls in the battleground states, Pennsylvania, Clinton plus, let's see here, we just have to jiggle this thing. Let's try. Virginia, Clinton plus 5.3. New Hampshire, Clinton plus 7. Georgia, Trump is plus 2.4, but that is falling, and that should not be in play. Pennsylvania, Clinton up 8. Michigan, Clinton up 6. Ohio, always going to be the closest, Clinton up 0.8. Florida, another close one, Clinton up 2.7. Iowa, Clinton up 0.5. Wisconsin, Clinton up 5.6. North Carolina, Clinton up 0.5. And of course, there are all kinds of polls in there. That Rasmussen, which is really not a poll, is also included. That's a sort of a wish list of the Fox News, Rupert Murdoch Republican National Committee. So you get the idea. Trump is in big trouble. Well, and we can also say his campaign is in total disarray. I listened today to Rush Limbaugh, and what Rush Limbaugh is talking about is that it's not fair that everybody's ganging up on the fascist billionaire, and that Trump is being pressed to drop out of the race, and that this is outrageous, of course, says the bully Limbaugh, who also says that it's not fair to talk about Trump's mental disturbances. Okay? So we will go through some of this in detail, but the principal warning we want to give is false flag terrorism. Everybody with a brain, and that unfortunately exempts quite a few libertarians who don't seem to have one. Everybody with a brain knows that terrorism helps one candidate and only one. It is Trump. False flag terrorism in these months, and I put this out months ago, if there's false flag terror, if there's something happening around the Olympics, if there's something that takes us back to Mexico City Olympics 1968, if there's something that takes us back to Munich 1972, and we just had a shooting incident at the Olympia shopping center in the part of Munich, Bavaria, which is close to the old Olympic facilities there, or if it should begin to look like Sochi, where you have terrorism going on, maybe not even so much in the Olympic site, but elsewhere. Any of that, think Trump. Think of enraged, adventurous intelligence factions, minority intelligence factions now, who want to put Trump in the White House. And we've had all those discussions, right? We have cataloged them here assiduously. I won't recite the entire name list, right? But it includes people like Bill Maher, Charlie Rose, Thomas L. Friedman of the New York Times. It includes Brian Lehrer of WNYC New York and many, many others. And some of that stuff has happened also again in the last couple of weeks. Friedman has come back to the comparison of the assassination of Yitzhak Rabin in Israel. I think the insight that we can bring to it is that this stuff is steered by these intelligence factions in the United States and overseas, to be sure. I would look in Britain. I would look at all sorts of places. And of course, this is no secret. Trump has openly and blatantly called in cyber strikes against the Democratic ticket, and he called on Russia, but I think if you look at the entire statement, he's calling in cyber strikes from anybody. He's putting these appeals out to the four winds. So in a certain sense, Trump is sending distress calls saying, I'm in trouble, I need help, I need airstrikes, I need cyber strikes on coordinates, Hillary, Kane, and so forth. And of course, it's not limited to cyber strikes. So this is extremely sinister. Everyone listening to this must inoculate themselves. They must prepare now that if and when this stuff happens, you've got to get out there on social media and say, this stinks of Trump. Maybe not Trump directly, of course. Only a fool would put anything into the hands of Trump, right? You wouldn't tell Trump anything in advance. He'd blurt it out as a psychopath, right? When that tormented, raging little ego feels put on the defensive or feels in a position of inferiority, he's going to blurt something out. So he might just divulge the plans. He can't help himself. He's a psychopath. He's mentally disturbed. And of course, this is the threat of Blurtgate. We have to look for Blurtgate. This is practically comic relief in the current situation. But if Trump has now begun to get these secret CIA briefings, what's he going to do the next time he feels on the defensive, when he feels like he's under attack, as he increasingly will be, when these tame journalists are less and less inclined to let him string out a whole series of big lies, whoppers, prevarication, mendacity, and all the rest, right? If they start feeling insulted by this and he begins to feel like he's getting his back against the wall, he's going to say, yeah, but I got a briefing from the CIA today that says you're wrong and I'm right. And here's what it is. And of course, it'll say something completely different. Blurtgate. The relevant authorities must prepare to stop the briefings to Trump because he's going to prove, inevitably, that he is incapable of understanding and, above all, incapable of keeping these secrets. So, beware the Olympics. All of those polls point towards terror storm out in the world and quite possibly also here at home. Back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley here in Washington, D.C. You've got to look at Tarpley.net every day. Tarpley.net, Tarpley.net every day. Every day. And you got to look at Webster G. Tarpley Twitter feed several times a day to be really informed. Now, just a little background. You can all go to Real Clear Politics, and they will show you the the poll of polls, right? How everything is coming together. And of course, the figures that I've just given you are actually not exactly timely, because they still include in these counts a certain amount of polling from before the Democratic convention or during that convention and other conventions. If we go and look at some of the more recent ones, you're going to see that the spread is actually more damaging, more unfavorable to Trump in many of these. And generally speaking, if they're bigger, then they also seem to be less favorable to Trump. So the lines are diverging, right? There's a scissors crisis, you might say, facing Trump. The scissors is that the Hillary curve is going up and the Trump curve is going down. Now, let's look at a couple of things. This was the week when on Tuesday the polls began to hit. Tuesday, Wednesday, lots and lots of polls, very bad for Trump. It's also the week when Trump began doing his utmost to break the Republican Party into pieces. And we've often talked about that wonderful effect. Evil combats evil and thereby does good in spite of itself for the worst reasons. With evil intent, criminal intent, evil forces, nevertheless, because of the nature of the universe, collide with other evil forces so that the good can benefit. Right now we've got evil forces fighting it out so that a certain advantage accrues to the side of the good. So we had the bad polls. We had Trump saying, I refuse to endorse Paul Ryan, the Speaker of the House, his primary next week. I refuse to endorse John McCain. He was bad with the vets. Of course, he was bad with the vets. McCain was one of the main forces preventing the MIAs from being recognized as something real. And he clashed repeatedly with the MIA family. So, yeah, it's true. But that's no reason to support Trump. This is simply evil colliding with evil. And that is not a reason to identify with one evil or the other. It is a reason to try to stimulate them to clash more and more so that evil can be diminished. And then Peggy Noonan, that dowager commentator of Reaganite vintage, right? One of Reagan's speech writers, writes that this was the week they decided he was crazy. Trump begins to get the full Palin, in other words, the full exposure of being a moron who is unfit for office, an imbecile. That's Palin, that's Trump. Now, of course, the full Palin, we would say, you want the full Palin, it's got to include fascist or Nazi fascist, best of all. It's got to include that he's psychologically, mentally disturbed, unfit for the thermonuclear launch codes. And, well, given all that, you really don't want him to be controlling the nuclear triad, even though he doesn't know what that is, right? The land-based ICBMs, the submarine-launched SLBMs, and then the bombers, right, the B-52s, B-1s, B-2s, and other bombers, right? That's the U.S. Deterrent. So they decided he was crazy, and the reports were that Newt Gingrich and Rudy Giuliani were going to do a psychological intervention. They were going to have a psychological session for the Donald. Now, of course, if you need Newt Gingrich and Rudy Giuliani as your doctors, you are in big trouble. Somewhat getting not enough attention in my view, and certainly getting no attention on NPR. this morning, right? Diane Rehm didn't care about this, not domestic, not international. That Joe Scarborough, that paragon of civic rectitude, Joe Scarborough on Monday, I guess, revealed that he had been aware of a security briefing received by Trump something like 2 to 3 months ago, I am guessing, where Trump asked repeatedly, why can't I use nuclear weapons? If ISIS hits us, we need to fight back with nuclear weapons, don't we? Said the fascist billionaire. 3 times he came back to this, right? It's like, Caesar and the crown. But in this case, Trump wants it. He wants to get those stubby fingers on the thermonuclear launch button. He wants to get the codes. And this is intolerable. Look at your family, your children, your grandchildren, whatever you have, anything you hold dear, ideals, religion. Trump is going to send that up in a thermonuclear fireball. And the Republicans are doing these, the Democrats are doing these things about how his rhetoric is shocking to little children, and that's fine. They should continue. But we've got to see the daisies. We've got to see the fireball. We've got to see what happens if a madman gets control of this power. And I would hope that in the corridors of the Kremlin and elsewhere around the world, in the corridors of power all around the world, you should put aside these suggestions, right, that Trump says he wants good relations with Russia or he wants to get along with Russia. This is at the same level, and you can find this on my Tarpley.net website. We found a speech by Hitler. This is November 1933. This is one of the elections after Hitler was already in power. And it is Siemensstadt, the part of Berlin, I think it's in the south, as I recall, which is the Siemens factory complex, right? So it's Siemens electrical equipment and so forth. So Siemensstadt, and Hitler gets up and says, we want nothing other than peace. Peace. Don't believe Trump. His speeches go in the same box with Hitler saying he wants peace. Back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. So, we have Nate Silver, the assiduous compiler of numerical details and information, right? This is the 538 website. Article this morning at 8:22 a.m. Election update, Trump's slump deepens in the polls. So presidential election shifted substantially towards Clinton, Trump reeling. The recent Fox News, Marist College, and NBC News Wall Street Journal national polls showed Trump trailing Clinton by 9% to 14%. Margins that would create the largest general election blowout since 1984 if they hold up. Clinton's numbers are on the high end of what we've seen lately. So Marist thinks that there's a house effect in the direction of Clinton and other, and so as the week goes on, right, at the beginning of the week, it was Clinton leading by 5 to 8 points. Now at the end of the week, it's Clinton by 9 to 14 points. Spiral of negative stories about Trump. And there we have Michigan, Clinton up 9, Pennsylvania up 11, New Hampshire up 15. Those are big leads. A lot of these are better than Obama's turnout or his what he attained 4 years ago. According to one calculation, the current lead is the biggest since 1984, I guess, or or maybe 1988, right? Depending on how much credit you want to give to the Dukakis post-convention bounce. But you get the idea. All right. Now, we need to examine more aspects of this. The ineptitude of Trump is amazing, right? We just had 255,000 jobs announced, created. There had been bad numbers before that. Trump incapable in his rally here at Ashburn to do the obvious thing that any political hack knows how to do, which is to take embarrassing headlines for the other side and then use that to beat their opponent over the head. All right, so false flag, we've done it. The polls, I think we've done some justice to them. In the middle of all this, the calls for Trump's tax returns, right? Trump is very sensitive about the fact that he's not as rich as he claims to be. He claims to be this tycoon and mogul. Maybe he's not. Why are we getting all kinds of emails that say, boo-hoo, boo-hoo, I'm a billionaire, but I'm in trouble. You should send me a few bucks, right? Your wretched pittance from his supporters. How are they to respond to this? The whole argument was, I'm independent because I self-finance, but you don't. And now, what does it mean? The $82 million in the past reporting period for the month of July, that is less than Romney got. I think that's about 20 million less than Romney got in the similar period. It's also less than the Democrats got. The Democrats were at 90 million, Trump down there at 82 million. And, of course, some of that is these pathetic little people who have been duped, who are throwing good money after bad in terms of Trump, because the more he shoots his mouth off, the more the Sheldon Adelson and Koch people of the world pull back. All right. Now, third, Trump is crazy. This is the week they decided he was crazy. He's erratic. The National Public Radio Diane Rehm show this morning, it happened to be in the international hour. The consensus almost was that Trump is suffering from dementia, from Alzheimer's, in other words, or some other form of dementia. We're going to have a Trump mental disorder of the week department here on our program, because we want you to be aware of what is being discussed, and it's quite damaging, right? We have the neocon Robert Kagan in the Washington Post. Surprise, Republicans, you picked somebody with a disordered personality. In other words, suffering from personality disorder. We have Eugene Robinson, who says, I used to think Trump was crazy like a fox. Now I think he's just plain crazy. Just plain crazy. During his interview with the New York Times, where he started saying, I'm not going to support Ryan. I'm not going to support McCain. I'm not going to support Kelly Ayotte, the amiga of McCain and Lindsey Graham. He was distracted 4 or 5 times. As soon as his mug appeared on the television screen in the adjoining room, he had to run and look at himself, right? This is a sick, sick, sick personality. He's getting things wrong on the trail. He doesn't know the difference between Quds Force and Kurds Force. He thinks Governor Kane, written Keene, is the same as Tim Kaine. So he's going from New Jersey to Virginia and back. He thinks that the guy who shot at Reagan is David Hinckley, right? John Hinckley Jr., as far as I know. He always wanted a Purple Heart. He wants to get people to pull their money out of their 401ks. He objects to babies. He criticizes Democratic fire marshals. He calls on foreign powers to hack the Democratic National Committee. He has hallucinations that he's seeing the money unloaded, pallets of banknotes unloaded as part of this absolutely ridiculous $400 million story. He thinks he gets letters from the National Football League when he does not. So this is a deeply troubled person. Of course, this $400 million, are we serious? This is de minimis. This is chicken feed. This is peanuts. This is so ridiculous. We can't take this seriously. And it's also important to remember, every time you've lost yourself on Benghazi or Iran or all these other things, those are minutes and hours where you're not talking about mass traction economic issues, right? You're not talking about jobs and living standards. You're not talking about the fact that the U.S. worker has lost between 1/2 and 2/3 of his standard of living since the collapse of the Bretton Woods system back in 1971, give or take. Lots and lots of people, newspapers in Pennsylvania and elsewhere telling him to come forward. So what is the overall effect? He's also saying the vote is rigged. All right, fine. The vote may be rigged, but Trump, where's the proof? Where are the details? What can you say other than a throwaway line? Everything for him is a throwaway line. Pull out of your 401k. Yeah, it could be true. Deutsche Bank, Unicredito, Argentina, Brazil, you name it, right? That whole thing is collapsing. It's actually going to be very serious, and it should be discussed more. But he has nothing to say about that. So the word is dementia, Alzheimer's. We'll try to get the quote and be back in a minute. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Limbaugh is exercised and exceedingly wroth because there's an article in Politico that describes the convening of a group of experts, advisors, insiders, what have you, the Politico caucus. And the Political caucus, according to what I heard on the radio, 70% of that group thinks that Trump should drop out now because of the down ballot drag that not only is Trump defeating himself with his insane ravings and his fascistoid comments and behavior, right, which always seem to point in the direction of all-out war. A thermonuclear exchange seems to be the upshot, but that this is also going to have a terrible impact on the Republicans' chances in the Senate and in the House, and of course that then, between the presidency and the Senate, that implies the Supreme Court. Hallelujah. It's time for the Republican Party to depart the scene. They are a menace, not just Trump, but the Republican Party has long been a menace to the future of the United States, right? We can't have a space program. We can't have a decent health program. We can't have normal pensions. The whole gamut of things that countries that are comparable, but often with fewer resources, they can do it, but we can't do it here because of this ideological cancer, this tumor. And I'm thinking of Toomey the Tumor in Pennsylvania is a good example. The Club for Growths, right? These Republicans. We can't do the elementary things. Let me get to one very elementary one. Zika. We have to give credit to Anthony Fauci of the National Institutes of Health Infectious Disease Department, coming on any media that he can and pointing out that without an infusion of money, the efforts to stop the Zika virus are going to break down. They're going to collapse for lack of support. And we have to cut through the various radical subjectivists who say, I don't want to wear DEET, and then they convert to say, yeah, I'll put some DEET on to avoid this thing. But the point of it all is, This is elementary. This is a scandal. This is practically a war crime. And Obama's not helping. Obama's leaving town today for the vineyard or whatever it is. This is not good enough, Obama. Obama, first of all, get yourself back here, and then you call in that Congress. You call in that do-nothing Republican, Tea Party, Trumpoid Congress, that chump, Trump the chump, Trump the frump, any way you want it. That's who they support. Call them back. Make them vote. And make Trump take a binding position. In other words, binding means something where he says, I'm in favor of this or I'm against it, and that's it. That is cast in stone, as they say, and you can't weasel out of it the way he always tries to weasel out of it. Of course, on NPR, they say, how come we can't solve these problems? It's not we, it is the reactionary, warmonger Republican Party, now increasingly tinged with the tones of fascism, because Trump has taken them over. The sticking point seems to be the Republicans want to include language to destroy Planned Parenthood. It's absolutely ridiculous. It's a network of clinics for women, and it ought to be supported in that way. And these stupid provocation films that various Republican fakers have made, or reactionary fakers, these have to be disregarded. But the Republicans have to be put on the spot, under the microscope, while babies are being born with birth defects, with microcephaly, and so forth. The Republicans have got to go onto the grill. Hey, grill, it's going to be St. Lawrence Day pretty soon, right? San Lorenzo of Rome was, unfortunately, he was one of the earlier Christian martyrs. They put him on the grill, and now it's time for Trump and the Republicans to go there too. Now, we've also had Trump's feud with the Khan family. I'm not so much interested in the biographical details of Khan, the guy that we saw, because he's made himself into a benefactor of the United States. He's done something, no matter what his background is, whether it's the Muslim Brotherhood or not, I don't care. Maybe that's not the decisive thing. But what he's done is to deliver a crushing blow to the fascist Trump, which all the wonderful Americans, right, all the wonderful native-born types don't seem to be able to have done. So along comes Khan and unleashes a haymaker, and sleazy Don from Jamaica, Queens, has been reeling ever since. So hats off to Khan. More power to Khan. And that's fine. Now, we talked about Blurtgate. We've got to talk also about the fact the intelligence community now signaling that they don't want Trump. With Hayden, right? Hayden, former head of CIA, NSA too, I think, quite a guy. Hayden was always saying, if you give us illegal orders to torture people, we're going to disobey. And then Trump says, no, I'm the great Trump, bluster, bluster. You're going to have to obey me. Today, this past week, Hayden said, if you want to do waterboarding, bring your own bucket, Trump. Trump, of course, a complete weakling, right? Lightweight, I guess, intellectually anyway. I don't know if Trump would have the guts to do any of that stuff. I sincerely doubt it. But the military forces won't do it. The other one is, when you think about that proposition that the U.S. forces should go and kill the relatives of terrorists, in many places in the Middle East, right, what with the tribal and family structures, to say go and kill the relatives of this particular terrorist is like saying go and wipe out that village. And go and wipe out that village is the Nazi SS of World War II. It's the Einsatzgruppe. You ought to read that book by Browning. It's called Ordinary Men. It shows how normal guys from the Hamburg Police Department were put into Eastern Europe and began massacring Jews, communists, all kinds of people, gypsies, in Eastern European villages, right? Think of Lidice, Czechoslovakia, right? So that's Heydrich gets killed, right? The great ally of Hitler, functionary, genocidalist, Nazi war criminal. He's assassinated, and at that point, the Nazis turn around and wipe out this village of Lidice. The Fosse Ardeatine near Rome, right? Kappler, Kappler. This was a big story 40 years ago still in Italy. The point being, you can't have the U.S. Army getting ordered to repeat the war crimes of the Nazis, for which the U.S. hanged various people at Nuremberg and elsewhere. Look at what we're getting into. Are we nuts? This has to stop. So Hayden says they don't want to do it, and now Morell, right? So CIA Director Morell, his argument essentially is that Russian President Putin recruited Trump by playing to his vanity, by saying, oh, you're a genius. And then Trump falls over and melts. Morell also refers to narcissism. Look, we have to repeat. It was very unwise for President Putin to get involved in the U.S. elections in this way. And our best advice as friends of Russia is cease and desist. Drop Trump. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley in Washington, D.C. Now, with quiet pride, I would like to point to the fact that it was on May 21st, a Saturday, as I recall, that I addressed a pretty good crowd at the Left Forum in New York City, and I had two presentations that are especially relevant. One was about Trump as a fascist and a psychotic who must never be allowed in the presidency or close to the thermonuclear launch codes above all, and at the same time, the question of the extinction, the collapse of the Republican Party as a national political force, and those are inextricably bound up, because the way you get political reform is to defeat Trump with a landslide, right? Crush him, humiliate him, send him whirling off into the outer darkness. And that will then lead to the loss of all power in Washington by the reactionary Republicans, which will hasten their decline into a merely regional party of backward elements. And that will open the door to the split of the Democratic Party between the pro-Wall Street wing and the anti-Wall Street wing, which is what you also see going on right now. And it's all, I think, that ought to be clear to anybody. So at that time, I had talked about the problem with Trump. I listed 10 possible mental disorders and or forms of mental illness. First was obsessive compulsive disorder. I don't know why the media are avoiding that. That's what he says he has. Alzheimer's dementia. And that was, as I meant to say in the last segment, it was on NPR this morning that we had Ayotte Dreesen, who is the editor of Foreign Policy magazine. It's not Foreign Affairs. It's something separate. It's the Foreign Policy Association, and it's a very active website. So Ayotte Dreesen starts off by saying, Trump is now lying at a much faster rate than he was. The lies are coming thick and fast. He's always lying. He has no compunction about lies that are going to be caught almost immediately, or that nobody will believe even for an instant. And then Ayotte Dreesen talked about the deterioration, the qualitative increase in cognitive impairment. Let's see if I can find some of these notes, right? Let's see. The question arose, is there such a thing as a psychiatric or psychological evaluation of a president? Right? A guy called in, or somebody was mentioning, a cop said, look, in order to be a policeman, you've got to take psychological tests. Is there anything similar for a president? And the consensus was there's not. Of course, there's not. There's only the voter. That's us. So therefore, we're talking about it. Yoki Dweezin then said, look, the dementia of Trump is becoming ferocious. He is constantly lying, doesn't care that he's going to be caught immediately or never believed. We haven't had his tax returns, and we need his health records, above all his mental health records. So there was a report from a psychiatric nurse that the problems with Trump, the cognitive impairment and so forth, have become more marked. That voters have got to educate themselves now about the psychological realities of Trump. The psychiatric nurse says Trump is increasingly exhibiting mood instability and cognitive deterioration. He talks about Hillary as the devil. What talk does this make? What sense does it make? And he also constantly has this refrain, they attacked me, or they attacked me viciously. How can I not respond? Well, of course, you've got to say sticks and stones can break my bones and names can never hurt me. Apparently, the Donald never got that down in Jamaica, right? It never reached him. When Bloomberg, they also pointed to the fact that the Bloomberg attack in the Democratic convention hit Trump hard. The idea that you need someone sane and competent. Those are both daggers pointed at Donald's breast. Therefore, the mental health and the policy ideas, there was some attempt to quibble. Well, some of this is his mental health and some of it is his policy ideas. They are united. They are one. He's unstable. He's irrational. His core supporters, I guess, don't care or can't tell, right? I mean, they have their own serious problems. There has never been anything like this. So, dementia is in the lead. So, obsessive compulsive disorder, Trump says he has it. Second, Alzheimer's disease. His father died of Alzheimer's. Trump is at increased risk. The NPR Diane Rehm show consensus, Alzheimer's this week. Third, narcissist personality disorder, megalomania. This is almost everywhere. Narcissist. Manic depressive syndrome with bipolar disorder has been brought up. 5, sadistic personality disorder, this delight in torturing the weak and the defenseless. 6, histrionic, right, the actor. Histrionic personality disorder with infantile regression. Here, one of these things today says, let me see if I can find it. I think it's one of our distinguished neocons here. The word is, I used to think that that Trump was the equivalent of a 10-year-old or an 11-year-old in the schoolyard, and now the estimate is that Trump is actually he's at the infantile level of a 1-year-old. So in other words, they're rolling back, reducing his mental age in the way that we've seen. Okay, histrionic personality disorder, multiple personality disorder. Well, that's John Miller, right? When Trump impersonates his own press spokesman and expects people to believe it. Creutzfeldt-Jakob or Jacob disease, right? Mad cow disease, in other words, right? All those bad Trump steaks that he eats, isn't that going to hurt him? Alcoholic codependence. This is a dark horse, maybe in the race, but the fact that he had that alcoholic brother for so long, and the family had to work around it, right? That certainly indicates, if you're estranged from your brother, this can have some pretty long-lasting effects. And, of course, neurosyphilis, right? That he should get the Purple Heart. because during his own personal Vietnam, in other words, Playboy fornicating with starlets and models in the 1970s, 1980s, that he claims that he escaped venereal disease, but maybe he didn't. And maybe that neurosyphilis is now coming back to haunt him. What else do we have? Krauthammer, neocon Krauthammer today. Donald Trump and the fitness threshold. He shows hypersensitivity and unedited, untempered Pavlovian responses. In other words, you can make him salivate anytime you want to by providing certain stimuli. The universal criterion of Trump is whether you're nice to Trump or not. That's all he cares about. Are you going to diss him or are you going to laud him? So, Donald will leave a lasting stain, says Eugene Robbins. I'm sorry, these are heavily weighted to the Washington Post, but you get the idea. We'll have a couple of more in just a minute. Back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley here in Washington, D.C. So how is Trump crazy? Let me count the ways. There is a competing group of 10 or maybe a dozen by now, psychological syndromes, pathologies, forms of mental illness, personality disorder. Peggy Noonan writes about it in the Wall Street Journal. Krauthammer here in the Washington Post. Trump's greatest success, says Krauthammer, is to normalize the abnormal. In other words, to be crazy and impose that on a great nation, right? By sheer force of insanity and psychosis and a diseased will. The Donald will leave an everlasting stain, says Eugene Robinson, Pulitzer Prize winner. The fitness threshold is not being met. George Will. Is Trump a sly rascal, cunningly in pursuit of immunity through profusion? In other words, if you're throwing out these insane eruptions, psychotic episodes several times a day, you can't keep up, right? The stuff about dump your 401k, babies, marshals, please hack the DNC. Got to remember, the one thing that seems to get him, he had a roast. It was a roast of the Donald in 2011. And he said the precondition was you could make fun of anything about Trump, but not imply that he's not as rich as he claims. And you remember he actually went and did a lawsuit about that. Well, now he's a public figure, so that won't work so well. Now, the defenders, the shills, here are a couple of shills. Arianna Huffington, who has always been a Republican for my money. She came to Washington with Newt the Toot as a Republican in the mid-90s. She's a Republican. So she says, oh, it's just lack of sleep. The poor guy. Byron York of the Washington Examiner, which exists as a will-o'-the-wisp, says, oh, Trump just has a different kind of intelligence, right? He's differently abled. And, of course, what he's trying to say is that Trump needs the briefing not as prose, but as a comic book. In other words, he's got to have a series of pictures, right, with, ISIS, bad guys getting hit, whatever, getting blown up. So it's like, Sergeant Rock and in Easy Company fighting ISIS. So you get the entire idea. The fact that the billionaires have turned against him, Cuban, Bloomberg, Meg Whitman, and some others, right? The Warren Buffett tax challenge, right? Buffett says, I'll show my tax returns if you will. These things really hurt because Trump, like so many mentally deranged specimens, he's in awe of money. He really is. One wag asked, hey, Trump, who's choking now, Trump? You're choking aren't you? We're back now. We're back on the sandlots of Queens 40, 50 years ago. 60 years ago. What am I saying? So a lot of them are saying Trump should drop out, and this gets on Rush Limbaugh. Let's also call it filing political bankruptcy, right? Maybe that's congenial to him, right? He generally gets out of things and walks away from them by claiming to be bankrupt. According to E.J. Dionne, this is an interesting view from the Washington Post, the party that lost its soul, that would be the Republican Party, what they're saying is the recognition, all of a sudden to recognize that Trump is mentally ill is in bad faith, because you knew that before. That what's really motivating the Republicans is when he says, I won't support Ryan, I won't support McCain, I won't support Kelly Ayotte. That's what has triggered the proclivity of all these self-righteous neocons and others to say, oh, he doesn't meet the fitness threshold, as Krauthammer would say. I think there's a lot to it. Ryan had regarded Trump as the guy who would sign all of his bills to cut taxes for the rich, to shred regulations, repeal Obamacare, and wipe out the social safety net. Remember, Ryan is a brutal austerity ghoul who wants to take your Social Security away, your Medicare away, your Medicaid if you need that. All of that goes, your prescription drug benefit. These people are worse than Mad Dog Bush, the younger. So, Reince Priebus was reported apoplectic, but he had months where he was willing to bow and scrape before Trump, before trying to pull the party together. And now he's furious and apoplectic. So the message, Trump can say anything he wants. He can persecute women, disabled, Mexicans, Muslims, minorities. But how dare he cause trouble for this wretched austerity ghoul, Ryan, Birch Society type guy? How could you do that? That's inexcusable. So the corruption of a once great political party is complete. And for once great, we have to go back to the 19th century. There's also, I think there's even a more important depth to this thing. When Trump attacks Ryan and these people in Congress, so Ryan, other congressmen also, but also then McCain, the dean of the Republican caucus in the Senate, Kelly Ayotte, the young amiga of the same group, that's an attack on Koch. Because you'll notice Koch, the Koch brothers, K-O-C-H, spelling Koch in American English, even when they want to give themselves the airs, right? Koch. Ed Koch of New York. Mayor Ed Koch of New York. No, Koch. So the Koch strategy is to not give money to Trump, but to use the money they have, which is considerable, to keep the Republicans in control of the Senate and the House. And now, in addition to the down-ballot drag that Trump is generating with his own flailing, incompetence, bungling, lack of discipline, pure insanity, we know the drill, he's attacking what Koch holds dearest. Koch wants to have the firewall, the line of defense, is on Capitol Hill. They want to keep controlling that. So that's, according to some, I think, well-informed people, that's what's actually going on. The Republicans turning on Trump. Back in a minute, after he turns on them. And since we're talking about Koch, the Koch brothers here on World Crisis Radio, the Koch brothers are taking it on the chin, and this has to happen. It's part of the breakup of the Republican Party, for which we give thanks. Kansas, a Republican primary, and all reactionaries voting. The Tea Party Republican, Hoyle's camp, is defeated by a challenger. So this is a Koch candidate, Hoyle's camp. Koch is backing Hoyle's camp, congressman from Kansas, and the guy is defeated. Hoyle's camp is one of your classic Tea Party types. He was in the Tea Party caucus. He's now in the severely misnomered Freedom Caucus, and he is now out. Now, what's the issue? Hoyle's camp was a purely ideological candidate. And, of course, in American history, this is rare. American politics, less ideological, more practical, right? That's the famous pragmatism. Now, I oppose pragmatism, of course. I condemn pragmatism. I fight it. It abandons the question of truth. But to be an ideologue like Hoyle's camp, he was so interested in fighting Boehner when Boehner was still the Speaker of the House that Hoyle's camp got himself thrown off the House Ag Committee, the House Agricultural Committee. And this reactionary ideologue, Hoyle's camp, was part of the group. He essentially helped to rock the boat. And the boat is that an ag bill has got subsidies for farmers, which I think in some cases are perfectly legit. Sometimes they're distorted, sometimes they're too much, whatever you want. And you've also got the food stamp budget on there, so poor people in the cities, Democratic voters, also get something out of it. That is democracy in action. Oh no, says Hoyle Camp, that is corrupt. We have to have the free market. I've been reading Hayek and Milton Friedman and von Mises. I've been reading all of my Austrian school, Chicago school, and they all tell me that we can't have this corruption. So he was one of the group that sabotaged the agriculture bill, and one of the reasons was we want to separate the subsidies for the farmers, trying to cut those, from the food stamps, which of course he wants to destroy completely. So the idea from the constituents was, how in God's name can you claim to represent us when you're representing this ideology with which we have very little to do, and you're sacrificing the things we need to survive economically? Hoyle's camp. So out you go. Now that's bad, because Kansas is, of course, the great plantation of Koch. The headquarters of Koch Industries, at least in the practical sense, is located in Kansas. Now, therefore, the Koch people, there is no joy in Mudville when the Koch people are in action. Now, we should have repeated before, we're told that the FBI knew about the hacks at the Democratic National Committee. They knew about it last year. The FBI deliberately delayed reporting those to the DNC, and that is a good reason to fire Comey. Remember, our rule is draconian. We believe in ministerial responsibility. If terrorism occurs on your watch, in your sector, you will be fired. You will get the axe. You will be canned. You will be sacked. You will be shown to the door. So that would certainly apply to Comey, right? And remember, Comey had no business getting up there and giving his opinions about whether Hillary Clinton was reckless or sloppy, or whether there were other problems with her performance. That is not up to you. That's the tradition of J. Edgar Hoover, that he's going to do a character assassination on you, even though he can't find anything to accuse you of. That is illegal. Comey should be ousted. Comey should be impeached. And similarly, General Keith Alexander of the National Security Agency and the U.S. Cyber Command, presumably he knew about this too. So these are people who have failed. The hacking of the Democratic National Committee exposes both of them as bunglers, and in particular Alexander, right? Because that's his turf. The Cyber Command, if a foreign hacker attacks the U.S. political party, the head of the NSA Cyber Command must be shown to the door. So those are important, and that's ministerial responsibility. Cazeneuve is still holding on in France thanks to his Freemasonic connections, but this is no good. Now, concerning Hillary Clinton, she just had her first press conference since the Mesozoic time, and she answered some questions. Now, what you can hear with Mrs. Clinton is, and since we're hearing her for the first time in a long time, she has not changed very much since the Dick Morris time. You'll remember that in the late, in the mid-'90s, and then during the time of preparing for the 96 campaign and during the Monica Lewinsky period, Dick Morris was giving the Clintons advice about small bore initiatives that can make you look good, and you can do it on your own. You don't need the Congress, and you can gather sort of brownie points in certain quarters by doing this. For example, the V-chip, right? You can block pornography so your kid can't watch it on your television. Or school uniforms. That was another classic one from Dick Morris. So Dick Morris, of course, a neocon and depraved and all that, right? We don't need to talk about him. This seems to be the spirit, right? Today she said, look, I have programs for everything. I have programs for Indians. I have programs for the black community. What you don't have, Mrs. Clinton, is a program for national economic recovery, which would be to seize control of the Federal Reserve, issue $6.5 trillion of 0% long-term federal credit, get the entire $1.5 trillion student loan burden down to 0%, $5 trillion for infrastructure, let out the contracts, governors, all kinds of Republicans will come running to get $5 trillion of federal 0% century bonds to build the infrastructure that the country needs. They want to be seen as dispensing the largesse of the 30 million new productive jobs. Add to that a 1% tax on Wall Street turnover. That gives you the money through revenue sharing to restore all the cops, all the teachers, all the firemen, all the state workers, and so forth, and 10 million new jobs, entry-level jobs in the Conyers plan, right? What I call the Marion Barry plan. So all of that is within reach, and she's still mucking around with these. I have a program for everything. It's all small bore. So we want to engage in a discussion on the issues. So now Melania Trump. Her website is down. Nobody knows what this is. On the website, she claimed that she had a degree. She claimed to have a degree in architecture from the University of Ljubljana in Slovenia. She does not have such a college degree. Now, the question being raised this week is she claims she came in 1996, but she might have come in 1995. What was she doing in the meantime? And if she lied on her application about the college degree, she could then be deported. Back in a minute. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. I got to try to accelerate here towards the end of the broadcast today. Melania Trump, did she come to the United States in 1995 or 1996? She has said 1996, but the nude photographs published by the New York Post, Rupert Murdoch, for whatever reason, seemed to indicate that she got here in 1995. Now, does that mean that Trump is being dumped by Rupert Murdoch? It's hard to tell, but it's a lot of billionaires are moving against Trump, so we'll stay tuned to that. If she came in 1995, she might have worked illegally. If she came in 1996, that's been her story. But the problem is, if you think about various people that have been deported from the United States, I mean, think about, say, Nazi concentration camp guards, right? Those people were not accused in the U.S. of what they had done in some concentration camp. They were accused specifically of lying about their Nazi past on their immigration forms, and any such lie can be quite serious. So it is told to me that having a college degree is a big, big plus. Practically, a prerequisite that you must have in order to get into the U.S. on the citizenship track. So if Melania lied about her degree and wrote that on her immigration form, she is now in danger of being declared an illegal alien and deported. There might have to be a trial. It would take a long time, but that's the idea, right? So now Trump, after all of his insane posturing and xenophobia, is now confronted. Why don't you clean up your own house there, Trump? So she had to get a green card, and she had to get then citizenship, and she has no college degree. So questions: why was her website taken down? Why is it not there? And then there's the other story, which continues to lurk in the background. She says she was a model, okay? There are reports that she was also an escort, and that she is today deeply concerned that acquaintances made during that time might come forward to divulge what they know and therefore haunt her in public opinion. Other than that, it's the obvious stuff, which is that she is humiliated, mortified, very angry, resentful, hurt as a result of the Copygate, her plagiarized speech on the first day of the Republican convention, and that she doesn't want to go out on the campaign trail, right? She never wanted Trump to run. She doesn't want to come out of seclusion now. She wants to stay home. She's not going to come out. I would urge honest journalists to do something about this, right? Where is Melania Trump? What is her condition? Is she okay? So let's look into it. Now, we want to say something about Jill Stein, Chris Hedges, and the Green Party convention. You remember Ralph Nader. Ralph Nader ran for president in 2000. The votes that Ralph Nader got in Florida would have given the election to Gore. Gore is no bargain. But would Gore have been quite as bad as George W. Bush? We don't know. But George W. Bush was really very bad for that time. So, Jill Stein. You have to ask Jill Stein, you're running for president, fine. But why are you insisting on making Hillary Clinton your main target? What is that? Why do you not attack Donald Trump, the fascist, with the same energy that you're expending on Hillary Clinton? In other words, why are you doing that? Who's making you do that? Jonathan Chait has a very interesting column about this. According to Chait, who listened to an interview, a kind of a double talk explanation coming from the mealy-mouthed Dr. Stein, why do you insist on helping Trump? In other words, the Green Party is now behaving as the left wing of Trump, and of course Trump is a fascist. So you figure out what that makes the Green Party. Stein's position is to say Trump has said many terrible things, but Hillary has done many terrible things. Sure, but let's compare what things. Trump says, why can't I use nuclear weapons? Eager to use nuclear weapons. With Hillary, right? Hillary and Bill had the White House 8 years. Did they ever use nuclear weapons? No. Did they ever threaten to use nuclear weapons? Not that we know of. Okay? There's also this interesting question. We're told by Parson Chris Hedges, right? The Puritan divine, the Jonathan Edwards of our time, a Calvinist, right? Total predestination, I guess. Chris Hedges says that Hillary and Trump are identical. I'm sorry, they're not identical. The first one is, who's a psychotic? Tell me, which one is a psychotic? Make the case. Pretty good consensus building up now that Trump is a psychotic. How about Hillary Clinton? Is she a psychotic? Make the case. You haven't made it. Second one is, if you want to be a fascist, and I think that's the issue, and that a fascist is going to tend to be worse than any other form, because fascism, once it takes power, it deprives you of your ability to fight back by mounting a pervasive dictatorship. Who has a fascist mass movement? And, of course, this is so obvious. Hillary is a laughingstock. She has no fascist mass movement. She has no mass movement. She has no movement. She has nothing. Her supporters can meet in a telephone booth. She just doesn't have a mass base of support which can be mobilized to show up at certain places. And, of course, Trump is always boasting that he has it. Well, Trump has the Ku Klux Klan with David Duke. He has the white supremacists who made robocalls in Iowa. He has the goons at his rallies who beat people up. He's got bikers for Trump. He's got these lunatic survivalist types, right? This sort of Cloven Bundy survivalist, sovereign individual, anti-government set, and so forth. In other words, he's got something that looks increasingly like a fascist mass movement. Can they be used for strike breaking? Does he have goons? I think he has that. So on the two key questions, who is insane, psychotic, and who has a fascist mass movement, Trump is disqualified on both of those. Now, the funny thing, tragic, if you go back, and I did this past week, it was actually interesting, go back to the Trotsky Germany pamphlets, and Trotsky in 31, 32, even 33 is saying that the policy of the Comintern is to set a trap for Hitler in the form of state power. In other words, the Comintern, ordered by Stalin, is out there saying, don't support the Social Democrat. Those guys are corrupt. They're not militant. All the things you'd hear today about the Democrats. And they're social fascists, okay? So what you had was the Communist Party spending its main attention attacking the Social Democrats and letting Hitler get through. So preventing a government and then creating a situation where Hitler could seize power. Isn't that something similar? So what is it based on? Cowardice, the desire not to fight Trump, fear of Trump. That's what it is. Now, the debate between Hedges and Robert Reich, interesting thing. Robert Reich says we have to go out and build a third party. That's ridiculous. What you have to do is carry through on my perspective, the Tarpley perspective. And that is to say, you want structural reform, Hedges? Fine. Here's what you do. You defeat Trump. You administer a crushing, humiliating rebuff to the fascist Trump. Right? You send his coalition to smithereens. With that, you are on your way to finishing off the Republican Party as a national political force. It's going to become extinct. It's going to dwindle. And then you've got the Democrats splitting into two parts. The pro-Wall Street group around Hillary and an anti-Wall Street group around the pro-labor or New Deal or similar stuff. So let's have the idea that it's going to have to be decades on a long Calvary. No, this can be done now within a couple of years. But the key to it, dear Stein and dear Hedges, is you've got to stop Trump. And with that, we depart and see you next week on World Crisis Radio.